Chapter 1: The Scandal. The glittering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the grand ballroom, where laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the air. It was the annual charity gala, an event that drew the city's elite together for a night of glamour and generosity. Mira stood at the edge of the room, like her simple but elegant dress a stark contrast to the sparkling ensembles around her. She was here for her sister, as always. Sophia had begged her to come, claiming she needed support for her big speech. "Mira, can you check my hair again?" Sophia whispered urgently, her perfect curls bouncing as she turned toward her sister. She looked every bit the part of the golden child, the youngest daughter, the prodigy, the one everyone adored. Mira gave her a small smile and adjusted a stray strand. "You look beautiful, Sophia. You'll do great," Mira assured her. But Sophia's expression was far from confident. "Just stay close, okay? I might need you." Before Mira could ask what she meant, Sophia was whisked away to greet some influential donors. Mira lingered near the dessert table, feeling out of place, but content to support her sister from the sidelines. The first sign of trouble came when a commotion broke out near the silent auction table. Whispers turned into gasps as a security guard marched toward the stage, holding up an envelope. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen," the guard announced, his voice cutting through the chatter. "We've discovered evidence of theft. One of the charity's most valuable items, a diamond necklace, has gone missing." Mira felt her stomach drop. She scanned the room for Sophia, who was standing frozen, her face pale. "We'll need to search everyone," the guard continued. Mira's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. She stepped forward, trying to catch Sophia's eye, but her sister wouldn't look at her. Moments later, the guard approached them both. "We'll need to check your belongings," he said firmly. Sophia's hands trembled as she handed over her clutch. Mira watched in horror as the guard pulled out a sparkling diamond necklace, the stolen item. "No, that's impossible," Mira whispered. But the room was already buzzing with judgmental stares and murmurs. Sophia's lips quivered as tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know how it got there. Mira, please, you have to believe me." Mira's protective instincts kicked in. She stepped in front of Sophia, facing the guard. "There must be a mistake. I'm the one who took it," she said, her voice steady despite the panic in her chest. The guard narrowed his eyes. "You're confessing?" Mira nodded. "Yes, it was me." The crowd gasped. Sophia clutched Mira's arm, whispering urgently, "What are you doing?" "Trust me," Mira whispered back. "It'll be fine." But it wasn't fine. Within minutes, Mira was escorted out of the gala in shame. Her parents didn't speak a word to her as she passed them, their faces twisted in disappointment. Sophia's tearful thank you was the last thing she heard before the ballroom doors closed behind her. Outside, as the cold night air bit at her skin, Mira felt the weight of her decision settle on her shoulders. She had done it for Sophia, for her family. Surely they'd forgive her once everything was cleared up. But as she waited by the curb for a taxi, she heard a voice. Sophia's voice, muffled but clear enough to stop her in her tracks. "It worked," Sophia said, her tone almost smug. "She'll never know what I actually did." Mira's blood ran cold. Chapter 2: Starting Over. The sharp scent of coffee filled the air as Mira sat at her desk, poring over case files. The small office, tucked in a quiet corner of the city, was nothing like the opulent world she had left behind. But here, surrounded by stacks of papers and the occasional hum of the fax machine, Mira had found purpose. For 3 years, she had built a life as a private investigator, using her knack for uncovering secrets to help others find closure. But some wounds refused to heal. No matter how many mysteries she solved, the betrayal of her family and the sting of Sophia's words still lingered like a shadow over her heart. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mira looked up to see her assistant, Leah, poking her head in. "Another case came in," Leah said, placing a file on the desk. "But, you might want to take a look at this first." Mira frowned as Leah handed her an elegant invitation card. The golden lettering shimmered against the ivory paper. "You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Sophia Carter and Elliot Hawthorne." Mira's breath caught in her throat. Elliot Hawthorne. The name carried a weight that made her chest tighten. He had been her fiancé once, years before the scandal that shattered her life. They had dreamed of a future together, but that dream had died the moment she took the fall for Sophia. I'm guessing you're not RSVPing, Leah said carefully, noting Mira's expression. Mira forced a smile. No, definitely not. She pushed the invitation aside and opened the new case file. A young woman had hired her to investigate suspicious activities at her workplace. It was routine, nothing too complicated, exactly what Mira needed to keep her mind off the invitation. But even as she tried to focus, the past clawed at her thoughts. Later that evening, Mira stopped by a small cafe for a late dinner. As she sipped her coffee, a familiar voice jolted her from her reverie. Mira? She turned to see Claire, an old acquaintance from her hometown. Claire's surprised smile faded as she took in Mira's guarded expression. I can't believe it's really you, Claire said, sitting down uninvited. You've been gone for so long. Mira shrugged. Needed a fresh start. I heard about Sophia's engagement, Claire continued, her tone turning hesitant. To Elliot. I'm aware, Mira said curtly, hoping to end the conversation. But Claire wasn't done. I always thought it was strange how quickly Elliot moved on after everything, Claire said. You two were so happy together. And then suddenly, Sophia. Claire, Mira interrupted, her voice firm. I really don't want to talk about it. Claire raised her hands in mock surrender. Oh, all right, all right. Just if you ever need someone to talk to, you know where to find me. As Claire left, Mira couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. Elliot had been her rock during the worst of times. How could he have ended up with Sophia? Was it grief, manipulation, or something more sinister? The next morning, as Mira prepared to head to her office, she found an envelope slipped under her apartment door. Her name was scrawled in messy handwriting, and the paper smelled faintly of smoke. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short, cryptic message. You took the wrong fall. Come home if you want to know the truth. Mira stared at the note, her heart pounding. Someone knew what had happened that night, someone who wanted her to return. But who? And why now? After all these years? Her hands trembled as she folded the note and slipped it into her bag. She knew she couldn't ignore it. Whatever answers awaited her back home, it was time to face them. Chapter 3: The Return. The countryside unfolded in a blur as Mira's car sped down the winding roads leading to her hometown. The closer she got, the more her chest tightened with a mix of dread and determination. The note had been vague, but it was enough to pull her back to the place she had sworn never to see again. As the town came into view, memories she had tried to bury resurfaced. The familiar streets, the cafe where she used to meet Elliot, the park where she and Sophia had spent countless afternoons, they all felt like ghosts of a life she no longer recognized. Mira pulled up to the Carter family estate, its grand facade as imposing as ever. The ivy climbing the brick walls seemed to have grown thicker, like the secrets hidden within its halls. She hesitated before stepping out, wondering how her family would react to her sudden reappearance. The door was opened by Elena, the family's longtime housekeeper. Her face lit up with surprise. Miss Mira? Oh, it's so good to see you. Elena, Mira said with a small smile, is my mother home? Elena hesitated, her expression clouding. She is, but things have been tense around here. Mira didn't have to ask what she meant. Tension had been a constant presence in their home, even before the scandal. She stepped inside, bracing herself for the inevitable confrontation. In the sitting room, her mother, Margaret Carter, sat poised as always, sipping tea. Her sharp eyes flicked to Mira, and the teacup trembled slightly in her hand. Mira, Margaret said, her tone clipped. What are you doing here? I came to see you, Mira replied evenly, and the rest of the family. Margaret set her cup down with a soft clink. I thought we were clear the last time you were here. You made your choices, and we made ours. Mira swallowed the lump in her throat. I didn't come here to dredge up the past. I needed to see you. Margaret studied her for a moment before letting out a resigned sigh. Your father is at the office. Sophia is out with Elliot. You're welcome to stay until they return, but I suggest you keep this visit brief. Mira nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. The cold reception wasn't unexpected, but it still hurt. Hours later, the sound of laughter drifted through the halls. Mira stiffened as Sophia's voice rang out, clear and melodic. She hadn't heard that voice in years, but it was unmistakable. Mira? Sophia's eyes widened as she stepped into the room, her hand resting on Elliot's arm. What are you doing here? Mira's breath caught when she saw Elliot. He looked older, more polished, but the warmth in his hazel eyes was still there. Or was she imagining it? I came back to visit, Mira said carefully. It's been a long time. Sophia's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, it's good to see you. Likewise, Mira replied, her tone icy. Elliot shifted awkwardly, his gaze darting between the two sisters. Mira, he said finally, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Life's full of surprises, Mira said, her expression unreadable. Later that night, unable to sleep, Mira wandered through the house, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She found herself drawn to the study, a room that had been their father's sanctuary. Pushing the door open, she stepped inside and ran her fingers along the polished mahogany desk. A stack of old journals caught her eye. She pulled the top one open, the worn leather cover creaking softly. It wasn't her father's, it was Sophia's. The pages were filled with notes about charity events, sketches of jewelry designs, and musings about her future. Mira was about to close it when a line scrawled in red ink stopped her cold. If Mira finds out about him, everything will fall apart. Her fingers tightened around the book as her mind raced. Who was Sophia referring to? And what secret could possibly be big enough to make everything fall apart? Mira carefully slid the journal into her bag. Whatever the answer was, she intended to find it. Chapter 4: A Web of Lies. The journal burned a hole in Mira's bag as she sat in the small diner on the edge of town. The smell of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee barely registered as she stared at the cryptic note she'd found. If Mira finds out about him, everything will fall apart. Who was him? And what was Sophia hiding? She flipped through the rest of the journal, scanning for more clues. Most entries seemed innocuous, mentions of social events, charity plans, and Sophia's whirlwind romance with Elliot. But buried in the middle of the journal was another entry that stopped her cold. He promised it would stay a secret. No one can know, especially Mira. Mira's grip tightened on the journal. She didn't know what she was looking for, but the answers weren't in these pages. If Sophia was hiding something this big, there had to be more, and Mira was determined to find it. The diner door jingled as Claire slid into the seat across from her. Mira had called her earlier, knowing she needed a second pair of eyes and someone who still had ties to the town. You look like you've seen a ghost, Claire said, eyeing the journal. What's going on? I found this in Sophia's things, Mira said, pushing the journal toward her. She's hiding something, Claire, something big, and it has to do with what happened that night. Claire flipped through the journal, her brow furrowing. This is weird. Sophia always seems so perfect, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. She's not perfect, Mira said bitterly. She let me take the fall for her, and she never looked back. Claire glanced around the diner, lowering her voice. If you want answers, you should talk to Mr. Hawthorne. Mira blinked. Elliot's father? Why? He's been acting strange lately. Ever since Sophia and Elliot got engaged, he's been keeping to himself, avoiding social events. People are saying he's sick, but I don't buy it. If anyone knows what Sophia's hiding, it might be him. Mira hesitated. Confronting Mr. Hawthorne felt risky, but Claire had a point. The Hawthorne family had always been close to hers, and Elliot's father had been a mentor to her during her engagement. If anyone had insight into Sophia's secrets, it might be him. That evening, Mira found herself standing in front of the sprawling Hawthorne estate. The grand mansion loomed against the darkening sky, its windows glowing softly with light. She rang the doorbell, her heart pounding. A butler answered, his expression polite but wary. Miss Carter, he said. This is unexpected. I need to speak with Mr. Hawthorne, Mira said. It's urgent. The butler hesitated before nodding. Wait here. A few minutes later, Elliot's father, Charles Hawthorne, appeared in the doorway. He looked thinner than Mira remembered, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes were sharp as they met hers. Mira, he said, his voice heavy. I wasn't expecting to see you again. I'm sorry to show up like this, she said, but I need answers. About Sophia. Charles stiffened, his gaze narrowing. Sophia? I know she's hiding something, Mira said, and I think you know what it is. For a moment, Charles said nothing. Then he gestured for her to follow him into the study. The room was as she remembered, lined with bookshelves and filled with the scent of aged leather. He poured himself a drink, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know everything, he began, but I know enough to tell you this. Be careful. Your sister isn't who you think she is. Mira leaned forward. What do you mean? Charles hesitated, his eyes darting toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in. Years ago, Sophia came to me for help. She was in trouble, serious trouble. There was a man, someone she got involved with, and let's just say it wasn't the kind of relationship a young woman should be in. A man? Mira repeated, her pulse quickening. Who? Charles shook his head. I don't know his name, but whatever happened between them, it left a mark on her. She begged me to make it go away, to cover it up. What did you do? Mira demanded. I pulled some strings, made sure it stayed buried. But Sophia, she's dangerous, Mira. She's willing to do whatever it takes to protect herself. Mira sat back, her mind reeling. Why are you telling me this now? Charles's expression softened. Because I owed it to you. You didn't deserve what happened, and because I'm tired of keeping secrets. Mira nodded, her thoughts racing. But as she stood to leave, Charles grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. One more thing, he said urgently. Whatever you think you know about Sophia, it's just the surface. There's more. Much more. Mira left the Hawthorne estate with more questions than answers. As she drove back to her hotel, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, Mira. You won't like what you find.